Ahmed Handule Ali, now 33, arrived in the UK at the age of 9 in April 2000 with his mother and two younger siblings from Somalia. They came to join Ali's father, who had been granted refugee status by the UK government. The family were also recognized as refugees by the Home Office, and Ali was given a travel document in 2004 under the Refugee Convention, which was valid for 10 years. In 2008, Ali was diagnosed with tuberculosis and in December of that year decided to travel to Djibouti for a short holiday in the hope that the warmer climate would aid his recovery. At some point after arriving in Djibouti, he lost his refugee travel document and could not get back home to his family, who live in Bristol. As there is no British embassy in Djibouti, he managed to get to neighboring Ethiopia, and when he finally reached Addis Ababa, he tried at least twice to get assistance from the embassy without success. It later emerged that the Home Office had failed to keep a record on its database of the fact that it had granted him indefinite leave to remain in the UK as a refugee. According to a ruling in the Court of Appeal last week, he has been stranded in Ethiopia undocumented ever since. His mother, who suffers from several health conditions, saved up money for several years to engage a solicitor to try to bring her son back home. In June 2015, a Home Office entry clearance officer refused Ali permission to return to the UK. The family appealed the first year and in the upper tribunal of the Immigration Court, but their appeals were rejected. Ali is undocumented in Ethiopia and is living a hand-to-mouth, destitute existence. Unable to work, he survives on the money his mother sends him. "I have been crying for 16 years over the loss of my son," his mother, Shamis Diria, told the said. "We want the Home Office to bring him back to us, but they are not listening to us. When we speak on the phone, I cry and he cries. He has not had a phone for the last 3 months, so it has been difficult to speak to him. Sometimes we don't even know whether he is alive. He went to primary school here, he went to high school here, he only went to Djibouti for a short holiday." In the Court of Appeal, the lead judge, Lady Justice Andrews, said in the ruling by 3 judges, "This is, by any standards and in many different respects, a most extraordinary case." Ghana's finance minister expects a draft memorandum of understanding from the country's bilateral creditors in May on a restructuring deal, he said on Sunday. The MOU, once signed, would cement a deal to restructure $5.4 billion of loans with its official creditors, including China and France, agreed in January. The restructuring is a milestone in Ghana's quest for debt relief as it charts its way out of the worst economic crisis in a generation and should unlock further tranches of its $3 billion program with the IMF. Speaking on the sidelines of the IMF and World Bank spring meetings in Washington, Mohammed Amin Adam also said he was confident the International Monetary Fund's Executive Board will approve in June the review of its staff-level agreement. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Sunday he would fight against sanctions being imposed on any Israeli military units for alleged rights violations after media reports said Washington was planning such a step. Axios on Saturday reported that Washington was planning to impose sanctions on Israel's Netza Yehuda battalion, which was operated in the occupied West Bank through the Israeli military, though the Israeli military said it was not aware of any such measures. On Friday, the United States announced a series of sanctions linked to Israeli settlers in the West Bank in the latest sign of growing U.S. frustration with the policies of Netanyahu, whose coalition government relies on settler parties. "If anyone thinks they can impose sanctions on a unit of the IDF, I will fight it with all my strength," Netanyahu said in a statement. Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz, a centrist former armed forces chief, said in a statement on Sunday that he spoke with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and asked him to reconsider the matter. The State Department said Blinken spoke with Gantz and Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant about Israel's security efforts to ensure the conflict in Gaza does not spread and the need for an immediate ceasefire and increased flow of humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza. The U.S. statements did not mention sanctions. Gantz said any such sanctions would be a mistake because they would harm Israel's legitimacy during a time of war, and that they were unjustified because Israel has an independent justice system and a military that keeps international law. Blinken on Friday said he had made determinations regarding accusations that Israel violated a set of U.S. laws that prohibit providing military assistance to individuals or security forces units that commit gross violations of human rights. Earlier this week, the ProPublica investigative organizations reported that a special State Department panel known as the Israel-Lehi Vetting Forum had recommended months ago to Blinken that multiple Israeli military and police units be disqualified from receiving U.S. aid after allegations of human rights violations. At least 5 rockets were launched from Iraq's town of Zimar towards a U.S. military base in northeastern Syria on Sunday to Iraqi security forces, and a U.S. official said. The attack against U.S. forces in the first since early February, when Iranian-backed groups in Iraq stopped their attacks against U.S. troops. It comes a day after Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani returned from a visit to the United States, where he met with President Joe Biden at the White House. A post on a Telegram group affiliated with Kataib Hezbollah said armed factions in Iraq had decided to resume attacks after a near 3-month pause after seeking little progress on talks to end the U.S.-led military coalition in the country. Another popular Telegram group close to Kataib Hezbollah, Sabrine News, later said there had been no official statement by the Iran-backed faction. A U.S. official speaking on the condition of anonymity said more than 5 rockets were fired from Iraq towards troops at a coalition base in Rumaline, Syria, but no U.S. personnel were injured. The official referred to it as a failed rocket attack, but it was not immediately clear if the rockets had failed to hit the base or been destroyed before they reached. It was also not clear if the base was the target itself. Following that, the official said an aircraft from the U.S.-led coalition in Iraq and Syria carried out a strike against the launcher. 2 security sources and a senior army officer in Iraq said a small truck with a rocket launcher fixed on the back had been parked in Zumar, a town on the border with Syria. An army officer said the destroyed truck was seized for further investigation, and initial investigation showed it was destroyed by an airstrike. We are communicating with the coalition forces in Iraq to share information on this attack, the officer added. The Iraqi security media cell, an official body responsible for disseminating security information, said in a statement that Iraqi forces had launched a wide-ranging search and inspection operation targeting the perpetrators near the Syrian border, pledging to bring them to justice. The attacks came after a huge blast at a military base in Iraq on Saturday killed a member of an Iraqi security force that includes Iran-backed groups. The force commander said it was an attack, while the army said it was investigating, and there were no warplanes in the sky at the time. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi arrived in Islamabad on Monday on a 3-day official visit, the Foreign Office said, amid tight security in the Pakistani capital. The visit, which Pakistan Foreign Office said would run till Wednesday, comes as the 2 Muslim neighbors seek to amend ties after unprecedented tit-for-tat military strikes this year. The Iranian president is accompanied by his spouse and a high-level delegation, Pakistan's foreign ministry said in a statement, adding that the group also included the foreign minister, other cabinet members and senior officials. Raisi will meet Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and other officials besides visiting the eastern city of Lahore and southern port city of Karachi, it added. Major highways in Islamabad were blocked as part of the security measures for Raisi's arrival, while the government declared a public holiday in Karachi. Raisi's visit is a key step towards normalizing ties with Islamabad, but Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, not the president, has the last say on state matters such as nuclear policy. Tension is also high in the Middle East after Iran launched an unprecedented attack on Israel a week ago, and central Iran in turn suffered what sources said was an Israeli attack on Friday. Pakistan and Iran have had a history of rocky relations despite a number of commercial pacts, with Islamabad being historically closer to Saudi Arabia and the United States. The highest profile agreement is a stalled gas supply deal signed in 2010 to build a pipeline from Iran's South Fars gas field to Pakistan's southern provinces of Balochistan and Sindh. Despite Pakistan's dire need of gas, Islamabad has yet to begin construction of its part of the pipeline, citing fears over U.S. sanctions, a concern Tehran has rejected. Pakistan said it would seek waivers from the U.S., but Washington has said it does not support the project and warned of the risk of sanctions in doing business with Tehran. Faced with the possibility of contract breach, penalties running into the billions of dollars, Islamabad recently gave the go-ahead for construction of an 80-kilometer stretch of the pipeline. The head of Israeli military intelligence, Major General Aharon Haliva, has resigned and will leave once a successor is appointed, the military said in a statement on Monday. Haliva said last year he accepted responsibility for the intelligence failures that allowed the Hamas-led attack on Israel on October 7th. Most major stock markets in the Gulf rose in early trade on Monday, on course to recover some recent losses as worries of a wider strife in the Middle East eased. Explosions echoed over an Iranian city on Friday in what sources said was an Israeli attack, but Tehran played down the incident and indicated it had no plans for retaliation, a response that appeared gauged towards averting region-wide war. Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei thanked the country's armed forces for their attack on Israel, saying the country has demonstrated its power regardless of how many targets were hit. Iran's official news agency reported on Sunday Saudi Arabia's benchmark index gained 0.2%, helped by a 2% rise in Dr. Suleiman Al Habib Medical Services, among other gainers. Saudi telecom company added 0.4% after the kingdom's sovereign wealth fund PIF agreed to acquire a 51% stake in Telecommunication Towers Company Limited from STC Group. The Qatari benchmark rose 0.3%, with Qatar Gas Transport gaining 0.5%. Dubai's main share index advanced 0.5%, with blue-chip developer Emaar Properties rising 1% and Gulf Navigation jumping 3.8%. On the other hand, Abu Dhabi's main index edged down 0.1%. Meanwhile, oil prices fell by more than 1% as the market focus switched to fundamentals after Israel and Iran played down the risk of an escalation on hostilities following Israel's apparently small strike on Iran. Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei thanked the country's armed forces for their attack this month on Israel, saying the country had demonstrated its power regardless of how many targets were hit. In its first-ever direct attack on Israel, Iran sent a barrage of more than 300 missiles and drones on April 13th in what it said was retaliation for Israel's suspected deadly strike on its embassy compound, Damascus, on April 1st. Most of the missiles and drones were shot down by Israel and its allies, and the attack caused modest damage in Israel. How many missiles were launched and how many of them hit their targets is not the primary question. What really matters is that Iran demonstrated its power during that operation, Khamenei said on Sunday. Early on Friday, explosions echoed over the Iranian city of Isfahan in what sources said was an Israeli attack. Tehran played down the incident and said it had no plans for retaliation, a response that appeared gauged towards averting region-wide war. In the recent operation, the armed forces managed to minimize costs and maximize gains, Khamenei added, urging military officials to ceaselessly pursue military innovations and learn the enemy's tactics. A baby girl was delivered from the womb of a Palestinian killed along with her husband and daughter by an Israeli attack in the Gaza city of Rafah, where 19 people died overnight in intensified strikes, Palestinian health officials said. The dead killed in hits on two houses included 13 children from one family, they said. The baby, weighing 1.4 kg and delivered in an emergency C-section, was stable and improving gradually, said Mohammed Salama, a doctor caring for her. Her mother, Sabrine al-Sakani, had been 30 weeks pregnant. The baby was placed in an incubator in a Rafah hospital alongside another infant with the words, "The baby of the martyr, Sabrine al-Sakani," written on tape across her chest. Sakani's young daughter, Malak, who was killed in the strike, had wanted to name her new sister Ruh, meaning spirit in Arabic, said her uncle Rami al-Sheikh. The little girl Malak was happy that her sister was coming to the world, he said. The baby would stay in hospital for 3 to 4 weeks, said Salama, the doctor. After that, we will see about leaving and where the child will go, to the family, to the aunt or uncle or grandparents. Here is the biggest tragedy. Even if this child survives, she was born an orphan, she said. The 13 children were killed in a strike on the second home belonging to the Abdel al family, according to Palestinian health officials. 2 women were also killed in that strike. Asked about the casualties in Rafah, an Israeli military spokesperson said various militant targets were struck in Gaza, including military compounds, launch posts, and armed people. Did you see one man in all of those killed? Said Saak Abdel Al, a Palestinian man whose family were among the dead, grieving over the body of a child in White Shroud. All are women and children, he said. My entire identity has been wiped out with my wife, children, and everyone. Mohammed al-Bihari said his daughter and grandchild were still under the rubble. It is a feeling of sadness, depression. We have nothing left in this life to cry for. What feeling shall we have? When you lose your children, when you lose the closest of your loved ones, how will your feelings be? He said. Floods swamped a handful of cities in southern China's densely populated Pearl River Delta following record-breaking rains, sparking worries about the region's defenses against bigger deluges induced by extreme weather events. On Monday, rescuers on boats in China's flood-hit Guangdong province raced to evacuate trapped residents, carrying some elderly people by piggyback from their homes and deploying helicopters to save villagers caught in the landslides. The province, once dubbed the factory floor of the world, is prone to summer floods. Its defenses against disruptive floods were severely tested in June 2022 when Guangdong was pounded by the heaviest downpours in 6 decades. Hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated. Since Thursday, Guangdong has been battered by unusually heavy, sustained and widespread rainfall, with powerful storms ushering in an earlier than normal start to the province's annual flooding season in May and June. In Pyongyang, a relatively small city of about 4 million north of the provincial capital, Wenzhou residents said the flooding over the weekend was not as severe as the 2022 floods, but they were still concerned. We are worried the floods could be worse than 2 years ago, said Song Zaiwei, who works at a spare parts factory. I have friends in Jintan town who have already removed their furniture. The village opposite that has been submerged to the first floor, Song said. His factory was still operating as usual, but rivers were being monitored in case they spilled over onto roads. North Korea fired several short-range ballistic missiles on Monday towards the sea off its east coast, South Korea's military said, drawing a swift condemnation from Seoul, which called it a grave threat to stability on the Korean peninsula. A Japanese government alert and its Coast Guard also said North Korea had fired what appeared to be a ballistic missile. The projectile appeared to have landed outside Japan's exclusive economic zone area, the NHK said. South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff said the North launched what is suspected to be several short-range ballistic missiles from near its capital, Pyongyang. The missiles flew about 300 kilometers and landed in the sea. The reports of the launch came as South Korea said its top military officer, Admiral Kim Yong-soo, had hosted the commander of U.S. Space Command, General Stephen Whiting, on Monday to discuss the North reconnaissance satellite development and the growing military cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow. After a summit between the two countries' leaders in September, North Korea has been suspected of supplying arms and munitions to Russia for its invasion of Ukraine, although both deny that claim. The North is believed to be preparing to launch another spy satellite after successfully putting a reconnaissance satellite in orbit in November. North Korea said last week that it had fired a strategic cruise missile to test a large warhead and a new anti-craft missile. Earlier in April, the North fired a new intermediate-range hypersonic missile as part of its development of solid-fueled missiles for all ranges of its arsenal, overseen by its leader, Kim Jong-un. North Korea is all in on rapid weapons development, not just for military advantage, but also for the Kim regime's techno-nationalist political legitimacy, said Professor Leif Erik Easley of Ewha University of Seoul. Maldives voters handed President Mohamed Mursiy's party a landslide win at parliamentary elections, media said on Monday. An outcome set to shift the Indian Ocean archipelago closer to China and away from traditional partner India. Mursiy's People's National Congress won 65 of the 93 seats up for grabs on Sunday. Preliminary results from the Maldives Elections Commission and media projections show. The main opposition, Maldives Democratic Party, dwindled to just 12 seats from 65 earlier. Both Beijing and New Delhi have wooed the Maldives as they vie for influence in the Indo-Pacific region. Elected last year, Mursiyy has pledged to end the country's India's first policy, straining ties with New Delhi. His government has asked dozens of Indian military personnel to leave the Maldives, a move critics could say could hasten its shift towards China. Mursiy's post as president is not affected by Sunday's vote, in which 368 candidates contested for 5-year terms. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Monday that the support of the United States, Britain and France for Ukraine was stoking serious strategic risks that had raised the risk of a direct confrontation between the world's biggest nuclear powers. Lavrov said the United States and NATO were obsessed with the idea of inflicting strategic defeat on Russia, and there were risks in such confrontation that could lead to an increased level of nuclear danger. The Westerners are teetering dangerously on the brink of a direct military clash between aggravating East-West tensions, including by issuing repeated warnings about the danger of a nuclear conflict. Lavrov said of particular concern states that are among the key sponsors of the criminal Kyiv regime, the main initiators of various provocative steps. We see serious strategic risk in this, leading to an ER in eastern Ukraine and seized control of the settlement of Bodanivka, as Kyiv said it urgently needed promised U.S. support to fend off a full-scale offensive. Units of the southern grouping group of forces have fully liberated the settlement of Bodanivka and have improved the situation along the front line, Russia's defense ministry said in a statement on the Telegram messaging app. Control of Bodanivka, located just to the west of the Russian-held city of Bakhmut, has been in doubt for some time. The village lies some 5 kilometers east of Chasiv Yar, a heavily fortified hilltop town and forward artillery base for the Ukrainian army, providing protection for some of the area's largest cities, including Kramatorsk and Slaviansk. The Russian report could not be independently verified, and there was no comment from Ukraine regarding Bodanivka. The General Staff of Ukraine Armed Forces, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, said in his daily video address that he held talks on Sunday with Army Chief Oleksandr Syrsky and Defense Minister Rustem Umerov about Chasiv Yar and other hotspots on the front line. In an interview with NBC's Meet the Press aired on Sunday, Zelensky urged Washington, where the U.S. House of Representatives has approved the $60 billion in aid for Ukraine, to quickly turn the bill into law and proceed with the transfer of weapons ahead of an anticipated Russian offensive. We are preparing for an offensive, Zelensky said, reiterating Syrsky's warning that Russia aims to capture the Chasiv Yar by May 9th, one of Russia's largest public holidays, and which marks Moscow's victory over Nazi forces in World War II. I hope we will be able to stay, and the weapons will come on time, and we will repel the enemy, and then we will break the plans of the Russian Federation with regards to this full-scale offensive. Ukraine says it expects Russia to launch a broad offensive in spring and summer after capturing the town of Avdiivka, east of Chasiv Yar, during the winter. Ukraine's defense ministry denied last week that Russia had captured all of Bogdanivka, while acknowledging it had lost some positions in the village in eastern Donetsk region. You are watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We return after this break.
Every day, our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders, politics.
Nobody's ambition is what the blood.
I have fought very firmly.
Natural occurrence, war, and the world economy.
I belong to everybody, and I belong to nobody.
ATN covers it all on ATN Politics today.
People into the country illegally. That is amazing.
Honourable
You human trafficker.
Honourable they are not picking our calls. They made up their minds.
So no agreement with the EU, but
Every day, our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders.
Welcome back. This is the International News on Atlantic Television Network. Now the rest of our stories. 3 German national agents for an employee of China's Ministry of State Security. Through their company, the couple concluded a cooperation agreement with a German university. Part of that agreement involved preparing a study for a Chinese contractual partner on machines parts that can be used for the operation of powerful marine engines, such as combat ships, prosecutors said in a statement. The Chinese contract partner was the MSS employee from whom Thomas R. received his orders, it added. The suspects also purchased a special laser from Germany on behalf of and with payment from the MSS and exported it to China without authorization, according to the prosecutors, who did not specify what the laser could be used for. Last year, Scott's government presented a strategy paper referring to China as both a key trade partner and a systemic rival. It also warned companies and research institutes about the threat of cyber and hybrid security risks from China. The Chinese embassy in Berlin did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Last week, Germany arrested 2 Russian German nationals on suspicion of spying for Ukraine in its war against Russia. Monday's arrests were made on the basis of intelligence gathered by Germany's domestic intelligence agency, prosecutors said. Ukraine is poised to send international bondholders a proposed plan to restructure its $20 billion in debt by early May, 2 sources familiar with the situation said. Time is of the essence for Ukraine to secure a debt rework agreement before a 2-year payment freeze agreed with holders of its outstanding international bonds ends in August. The freeze was struck after Russia's invasion of the country in February 2022 hit its economy hard. Sharing a proposal with its bondholders is set to mark the starting point for formal talks, including holding detailed discussions and the exchange of privileged information. One of the sources said Ukraine's government hoped to reach the outlines of an agreement in June at the latest. Ukraine's finance ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment. On Sunday, the sources declined to be named due to the sensitivity of the issue. The war-torn economy has been sounding out major investors since late 2023 over plans to restructure its international debt and the possibility of raising fresh financing, as previously reported. But so far, discussions have been held on only informally. The country has struggled to shore up its finances, though momentum has picked up after the U.S. House of Representatives on Saturday passed a legislative package that will provide Ukraine with security assistance of $60.8 billion. It is unclear what a restructuring might look like, as it involves an economy engulfed in a war whose outlook, fiscal position, and ability to pay back its debt remain uncertain. Panzer's delicatessen in northwest London has lost 37 suppliers from the European Union since Britain left the bloc's single market in 2021, and owner David Josephs fears more will quit after the UK introduces new border checks this month. Britain voted to leave the EU in 2016, but such was the scale of the task to untangle supply chains and erect custom borders that it is only this year setting new rules. EU exporters of chilled and frozen meat, fish, cheese, dairy products and some cut flowers have had to present health certificates signed off by a vet or plant inspector since January 31st, a demand that smaller British retailers and wholesalers say can delay the arrival of goods by weeks. They are now warning that the start of physical checks, along with higher charges from April 30th, will restrict the variety and freshness of fine artisan foods such as charcuterie, cheese, pasta and olive oil, and that prices will rise. We find small independent producers making fabulous things that you wouldn't necessarily see outside their region, and we are bringing them into London, but it is getting harder because some of them don't want to do the paperwork, said Patricia Michelson, owner of retailer and wholesaler La Fromagerie. The new hurdles risk unraveling Britain's diversity of food and drinks, said John Ferrand, managing director of the Guild of Fine Food, which represents 12,000 independent food businesses. Only the very biggest processors and retailers are going to be able to deal with this bureaucracy and the extent of these checks, he said. The smaller producers and retailers will just give up, and we'll end up with less choice and less good food and drink. The government says the new checks will help prevent diseases and pests entering Britain. It also says it will level the playing field for British exporters. In 2021, the EU immediately enforced its rules, leading to port delays and prompting some British exporters to stop selling to the bloc, at least initially. Britain's Thames Water has proposed spending an additional £1.1 billion on environmental projects over the next 5 years, in an updated business plan aimed at winning regulatory support. The company is at risk of nationalisation as it struggles under the weight of its £16 billion of debt and needs to agree a plan that will help tackle constant sewage leaks and provide some kind of return to investors without requiring an unacceptable hike in customer bills. Thames Water, which supplies about a quarter of the British population, was thrown into crisis last month when an existing business plan was branded uninvestable by its owners. Under the new proposal published on Monday, Thames Water said the rise in expenditure would go on clean-up projects and would come without hiking customer bills by any more than the 40% jump it had already proposed for the 2025 to 2030 period. While that may help win over the regulator Ofwat, the company also needs the backing of its shareholders, who in March refused to invest the £500 million equity lifeline. Britain's privatised water industry has come under scrutiny after sewage spills jumped in recent years, after a period when some owners had taken out big dividends and loaded firms up with debt. Public outrage over pollution and the prospect of higher bills to fix the problem has put the regulator under pressure to ensure consumers get value for money, but investors say they still need to make returns, resulting in a standoff over Thames Water. We will continue to discuss this with our regulators and stakeholders, Chief Executive Chris Wedson said. The company said it could also fund a further £1.9 billion of investment into the business, but that would require an extra £19 on household bills. Thames Water has until June 12 to win approval for its plan under the deadline set by Ofwat. The 40% rise proposed by Thames Water compares to the 31% increase proposed on average by the other water companies in Britain for the 5-year period. Thames Water's 9 shareholders include Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System, the UK's Universities Superannuation Scheme, a unit of the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, and the China Investment Corporation. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to the political battleground state of Wisconsin on Monday to announce 2 final rules aimed at improving access to long-term care and ensuring the quality of caregiving jobs, a White House official said. The White House said Monday's announcements finalized 2 rules first announced in September as part of U.S. President Joe Biden's pledge to crack down on nursing homes that endanger resident safety and to improve access to high-quality care. Harris will announce the rules in a meeting with nursing home care workers in La Crosse, Wisconsin, marking her 3rd trip to the state this year and her 7th since taking office. Biden visited Wisconsin last month after clinching the Democratic Party's nomination as he focused on securing votes among suburban women, black voters and Latinos across the Midwest ahead of the November presidential election. A new poll released earlier this month showed Biden leading his Republican rival, former President Donald Trump, by 4 percentage points, up 1 percentage point from March. Wisconsin and Michigan are part of the Blue Wall, along with Pennsylvania, that Biden will need to hold secure a 2nd term. In 2016, Trump flipped all 3 to win the White House, but Biden took them back 4 years ago. President Joe Biden on Monday will celebrate Earth Day by announcing $7 billion in grants for residential solar projects that will power nearly 1 million low-income households, the White House said. The announcement kicks off a week of activities aimed at touting the Biden administration's record on climate change. Biden will reveal the funding during a trip to Prince William Forest Park in Triangle, Virginia, where he will also announce that applications are open to join the American Climate Corps, a program to prepare young people for jobs in climate-related industries. Young voters who tend to be more concerned about climate change are a key constituency for Biden, a Democrat, as he prepares to face former President Donald Trump, a Republican, in the November presidential election. The $7 billion of solar funding through the Environmental Protection Agency's Solar for All grant competition was included in Biden's landmark climate change law, the Inflation Reduction Act. It will create 200,000 jobs and save households in the program about $400 a year, according to the White House. Grant recipients include 60 state and local agencies and nonprofits with programs to help residents in poor communities go solar and save on their power bills. The winners include several organizations with plans to provide solar to Native American households in states including Alaska, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. Residential solar has long been regarded as difficult to access for lower-income Americans because of its high upfront cost and because less affluent people tend to rent their homes or live in apartment buildings. The Australian Federal Court has ordered Elon Musk X to hide posts containing videos of a stabbing at a Sydney church last week from users globally after the E-Safety Commissioner launched an urgent court case on Monday evening seeking an injunction. X, along with Meta, were ordered by the E-Safety Commissioner, Julie Inman Grant, on Tuesday last week to remove material deemed to depict gratuitous or offensive violence with a high degree of impact or detail within 24 hours or potentially face fines. The material was footage of the alleged stabbing of Bishop Marie Emmanuel last Monday evening while he was giving a live stream service at the Assyrian Christ Good Shepherd Church in Wakeley. On the weekend, X said it had complied with the request but intended to launch a legal case challenging the orders. In a hearing late on Monday afternoon, barrister for E-Safety Christopher Tran told Justice Geoffrey Kennett that X had geo-blocked the posts containing the video, meaning Australians could not access them. However, the posts were still accessible globally and to Australians who used a virtual private network connection that made their IP address appear outside of Australia. Tran said that meant that X was not compliant with the Online Safety Act around the removal of the material. The agency wanted the post to be removed with an interim measure for the post to be blocked from access globally. X's legal representation, Marcus Hine, sought to have the matter adjourned. He noted that it was close to 2 a.m. in San Francisco, where X is headquartered, and he had no instructions from his client on the matter. Kenneth said the better course was to make the interim order until a later hearing and ordered the content to be put behind a notice globally. With the interim order in place until 5 p.m. Wednesday, 24th April, Sydney time. The Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones on Monday described X as a factory for trolls and in misinformation as the government vowed to fight any legal challenges brought by the company over removal orders related to the video of the Wakeley stabbing. The Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said on Monday that the pain of many people has been exacerbated by what occurred on social media. Albanese said there was no place for the broadcast of violent images, adding, "I find it extraordinary that X chose not to comply and are trying to argue their case." A forensic crash investigator was alarmed at the design of the intersection where a 20-year-old cyclist died because of its traffic lights gave both vehicles the impression they had right-of-way simultaneously, the Queensland's Coroner's Court has heard. A recreation of the fatal accident showed that the driver of the Brisbane City Council bus, Andrew Rudnicki, had almost no opportunity to see Maximilian Patrick McDowell before he struck him and killed him. McDowell died at the corner of Gillingham and O'Keefe Streets, Woolloongabba, in May 2021 as the City Glider bus turned onto the Southeast Busway. Council Assistant Emily Cooper opened the first day of a coroner's court inquest hearing on Monday by announcing its terms of reference had changed to include the traffic lights at the intersection and whether changes might need to be made as to the road as it exists today. The court initially declined to hold an inquest before McDowell's family appealed against the decision. Sergeant Carl Cutler, lead investigator for the Queensland Police Forensic Crash Unit, filed the report finding traffic lights at the intersection gave a green light to pedestrians and traffic turning left at the same time. He said watching the traffic lights as he arrived at the scene immediately, for me, raised an alarm bell because there was no separation between when buses and cyclists got the green light. It provides both pedestrians and motorists with the mindset